Joining us right now is Speaker Johnson. Mr. Speaker, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
What is the method to the madness of 4 separate bills? Give both sides a chance to weigh in separately because there's such diversity of opinion on it?
Yeah, we didn't think it was fair or right for the House to be, rolled by the Senate. They sent us a large bill where everything was merged together, the Senate supplemental. That was not the will of the House. The will of the House is to address it in single subjects, in regular order, in a regular process, with an amendment process. That's the way this is supposed to work. So that's what we're going to do this week. So you'll have 4 different bills, as you said. You'll have Israel first in the order, then you'll have the Indo-Pacific region, then you'll have the Ukraine matter, and then a 4th bill will introduce our other national security priorities, and that'll include additional sanctions for Russia and Iran, and the Repo Act, which is the seizure of corrupt Russian oligarchs' assets to assist with all this. We're going to introduce the loan concept into these products, and so this will be a very different, I think, product in the Senate, and we'll let the House do its will. That's what we have to do.
So, Mr. Speaker, what's the vibe in your caucus? Because it seems like when it comes to the Republicans, there's more support for the Israeli package, but not as much support for the Ukraine package. How do you get the feel it's going to go? Do you see more Republicans voting for that package and then more Democrats voting for the Ukrainian package?
That's probably the way it'll shake out, and the beauty of this process is, again, that every member, Republican and Democrat, can vote their own district and their own conscience on this thing, and that's the way it should work. Look, I think there's a lot of support for Israel, obviously, on the Republican side. Clearly, on the Democrat side, they have a real division over that. It's been pretty shameful, actually, that leading Democrats are turning their backs on Israel at this most desperate and important time. And then, of course, the inverse is true on the other side. Most of the Democrats, I think, are in favor of the Ukraine funding, and some of my Republican colleagues are more, a little less bullish on it. Let's say that. Look, I think there's a big difference between lethal aid, right, and some of the big humanitarian things. If you convert assistance to a loan, I think that's more palatable for people. But we'll break this down. Look, 68% of the Ukraine funding is going to replenish our own stockpiles. That is American jobs making American weapons. I think that's something that people understand and they'll support, but we'll see how all this plays out.
Mr. Speaker, I know you talked to the president yesterday. Did you talk to him about his plans for Israel, his plans for Gaza? What did y'all talk about?
Well, I called the president to give him a heads up and explain to him exactly what we're doing. We're not going to be rolled by the Senate. The House is its own body, and the House has to work its own will. And this is not what the president wanted. It's not what Schumer wanted. But I have to govern my chamber, and I told them how this is going to go down.
Well, Mr. Speaker, ultimately, they've got to pass the rule first, and they will, and then everybody gets to vote. But there are a number of members of your own caucus, Republicans, who have said, if you bring up the Ukraine thing, this was a week or so ago, they would vote to vacate you, kick you out of your job. 2 questions. 1, is that still a worry? And 2, if they do vote to vacate and you're kicked out of your job, if you were to resign from Congress, you could theoretically give the Democrats the majority in the House of Representatives.
Look, none of that's going to happen. I don't worry about the vacate motion at all. I'm here to do my job. I don't think that's going to happen. I think what a lot of people were concerned about was us being pressed to pass the Senate supplemental, again, where everything's merged together. This is what conservatives like me and all my friends, Freedom Caucus and otherwise, this is what we desire. This is what we work towards, is to have the regular process of Congress work. And that's exactly what you're going to see this week. So, again, everybody gets to vote their conscience on each of these measures separately, and I think that resolves the concern. So, no, I'm not worried about that at all.
So you got $60 billion for Ukraine, $14 billion for Israel, $9 billion for humanitarian assistance to Gaza, $4.8 billion for Indo-Pacific. Two phases to this question. Number 1, do you see this passing or not passing by Friday, or is this going to be the beginning of the process? And number 2, have you met a Republican that doesn't look up to Ronald Reagan? And what do you think Ronald Reagan would say about Ukraine aid?
Well, look, I'm a Reagan Republican. I'm a child of the '80s, and we were all raised, as you know, Brian. All of us, we understood the concept of peace through strength. That America is an exceptional nation. We have an exceptional role in the world, and the only reason that the world order has been maintained since World War II is because we're perceived as the superpower that can defend freedom. It doesn't mean we need to be the world's policeman at all, but it means we have an important role, and the perception of a strong America is good for stability around the globe. So that's what we're going to project here. I think we'll do our duty, our responsibility. With regard to the numbers, some of that's still being decided. The bill text will come out later today. But one of the important things to note here is that in the amendment process to all this, our members can bring amendments to, for example, add pay-fors for a lot of this funding. So this is going to make sense to people. I think this is the process, what the American people should expect.
So, Mr. Speaker, go ahead, Ainsley.
Well, Mr. Speaker, thank you, Lawrence. There were all these chaotic protests yesterday in New York, in California, in Chicago. I know you were following that. 5 hours on the Golden Gate Bridge. People couldn't move. The Senate is introducing this new law to make it a federal crime to purposely obstruct public roads and highways. What is the House doing?
Yeah, look, we will do the same. What's so shameful about all this, for all the obvious reasons, is that we're turning our back on Israel, our critical ally and important friend. But the most shameful part about it, I'm afraid, is the silence that you hear from Washington. There's so many leading Democrats who refuse to speak out about this. And, I think they're appeasing the pro-Hamas wing of their party now, and that's a serious problem. We need to stand with Israel unequivocally. I spoke to my counterpart, the Speaker of the Knesset, Speaker Ohana, about 36 hours ago or so, and he thanked me and us, the Republicans and others who have stood strong with Israel with our voices, and that's a very important thing for them. I spoke with Prime Minister Netanyahu about a week ago, and he expressed the same sentiment. We've got to stand strong. We've got to tell the world and show the world that Israel is not alone here.
But, Mr. Speaker, something has changed, because we covered the event, the march in Washington, where you had Hakeem Jeffries gave a powerful speech. You had Chuck Schumer. You guys were all linked in arms, and you all said that you're going to stand with Israel. But it seems like some of the people on the left now are a little fickle. And right now, Israel needs us. They have the same enemy as we have, which is Iran. Hamas is not a friend of ours. Have you had any conversations with the leader about his party? Because you got Rashida Tlaib that's in there, and in her district, people are saying death to America.
Yeah, it's unconscionable that anybody would stand by that, and it's shameful that we have House members who do. Chuck Schumer is really responsible for Israel not being funded yet. Remember, we sent over an Israel funding package back in October. It was within the first week of my being the Speaker. We did a pay-for. We took it out of the IRS expansion slush fund to take care of that, but he refused to even address it, and it's been sitting on his desk. We tried to pass Israel again about a month ago, and 166 House Democrats voted against that funding. Why? Right. Because Joe Biden said he would veto it. It's really shameful.
Well, speaking of Chuck Schumer's desk, later today, from the House, you're going to march over and drop on his desk the articles of impeachment for Alejandra Mayorkas, the Department of Homeland Security Secretary. You guys passed that months ago. Why is this taking so long?
Well, the timing's important. Look, the Biden border catastrophe is the #1 priority of House Republicans, and it remains the #1 priority of the American people. We're fighting for border security every single day. We have passed our legislation. We've passed resolutions, and now we passed the articles of impeachment. That's our constitutional responsibility in the House. We did a long, methodical, deliberate process, as the Constitution it requires of us, and we got that done. And now we're transmitting it to the Senate, and we're demanding that Chuck Schumer have the full trial, that they hear the evidence, let us put it on for the American people, and then remove this individual from office. This desperate times call for desperate measures, and Secretary Mayorkas is, in my view, the worst cabinet secretary that has ever served in the history of the United States. It is a catastrophe that was committed by design. They allowed this. We all know the facts and the terrible tragedies that have come from it, and there has to be accountability.
Speaker Johnson, in all that aid, nothing that you're requesting for Friday, none of it has border in it. Why not?
Well, we are trying to merge some of that into it, but the difficulty with the border provisions is that the Schumer Senate won't move it. We've sent over our legislation, as I noted. We've sent over resolutions. We've sent a lot to the Senate.
HR2.
It dies on his desk. HR2 is our big signature piece, and it had all the provisions that would solve that border catastrophe. But what's really important here to emphasize as well is the president has executive authority, and he needs to use it. I think most of the American people understand that. He could close the border today. He could have closed it 2.5 years ago. He refuses to do it.
Indeed. Mr. Speaker, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you.
Praying for you. Thank you for your faith.